The Gathering. Stories from Harleen Quinzel. Number 1. I was 4 years old, asleep in bed. In the middle of the night, someone picked me up, held me, gave me a kiss and said, "I love you." The voice sounded exactly like my grandpa's. The next morning, I went to my grandpa's room, like I always do. Everyone told me that I couldn't go in, so when they weren't looking, I ran in and jumped on my grandpa's bed and said, "Wake up, Grandpa." But he didn't wake up. I noticed blood coming from the corner of his mouth. I screamed to my grandma that Grandpa's mouth was bleeding. They came in and yelled at me to get out, and they were panicked that I was in the room, and at that time I didn't understand why. They took me to another room and told me that Grandpa had died in the middle of the night. That's impossible. In the middle of the night he came and picked me up and held me, gave me a kiss and told me that he loved me. But they said he couldn't have because he had passed on. And then I asked them who picked me up. And they answered, "No one. You were asleep in your bed all night." But I know that he had picked me up and held me that night. I still believe it to this day. And I've believed in spirits ever since. Number 2. I have a story to tell about a little town in Arkansas in the United States. There was a movie that came out called The Legend of Boggy Creek. Upon seeing this movie, it got my curiosity up. So one day, I made my mind up to go investigate. I went to Falk, Arkansas, by the way of hitchhiking. It was a little after 1 a.m. when I arrived in Falk. The town was pitch black to the point that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. You couldn't see the road. You could just feel the surface right under your feet. I had been walking around for about 20 minutes outside of town when I started hearing noises that I'd never heard before in my life. The noises were something of a roar, but more creepy. I stopped for a minute to try to identify what I was hearing. And then suddenly, in the black of night, I could feel hair or something rubbing against my face, and the most god-awful smell. I froze. I'm not exactly sure how long I was frozen there, but it was like my brain was telling my feet to move, but they wouldn't or couldn't. It was like I was being circled by something, but could see nothing because of the darkness. I'm not sure how long I was frozen there, but eventually I started to run. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. Thank God I found a convenience store. It was closed, but it had its outside lights on. I went and put my back against the door, sat down and dozed off. They came to open the store in the morning and woke me up. I went in, bought a drink and cigarettes, and started on my way again. I started smelling a very familiar smell, and I started dusting myself off. I was pulling brownish, blackish hair off my clothes. After my little investigating trip to Falk, Arkansas, my mind is made up. I will never be going to Falk, Arkansas again. Number 3. I was lying in bed asleep one night. My then 2-year-old son was asleep in his toddler bed. My oldest son, in bed with me. We share the house with 5 other people, so my boys and I have to share a room. It was the middle of January, and all 3 of us were asleep. I suddenly woke up to the feeling of a very evil presence in my room. I tried to move, only to discover I couldn't. My entire body was paralyzed. I was able to open my eyes, and even though it took a lot of strength to do, slightly move my head to look at the foot of my bed. Standing there at the foot of my bed was a very large entity. The bottom half was like that of a goat, and the top half was humanoid and very muscular. The head was the face of a goat, with horns that only slightly curved. It was so tall that it was bent over at my ceiling. I was absolutely terrified. It noticed that I saw it, and all of a sudden, its large, clawed hands reached out, cupped as if to strangle me. It did not touch me, but I felt it around my throat, and it began to choke me, and the other hand had grabbed my right leg I felt a burning sensation where it had grabbed me, and I began to fight. My fear turned into anger. My children were in the same room, and I managed to call out, "Michael, Gabriel, help me." Since a very young age, I had been taught to call on them in times of need, like that night. That seemed to infuriate the demon, and it tightened its grip around my neck. I continued to cry out to the archangels. This seemed to go on for a very long time. What was only minutes seemed like hours. A battle for not only my life, but my soul as well. Eventually, though, I woke up my oldest son, who was actually a very heavy sleeper. He saw the demon and cried out to me. The moment he did that, the demon's attention was turned towards him. His grip on my body was gone, and I was able to sit up. I grabbed my son and held him close to me and said, "Michael, Gabriel, I call on you to banish this demon to the hell he came from." I angrily looked at the demon in the eye and said, "You will not hurt me or my children. Be gone and never return." The demon looked angrily at me and my son and roared at us. Then he disappeared. I was so exhausted from the encounter that I instantly fell back to sleep. I awoke the next morning feeling completely exhausted. Playing the memory of the night before off is just a very bad dream. I went to get out of bed and a pain went through my leg. I looked to see 3 scratch marks on my right leg. I completely wrote it off as me doing it to myself in my sleep. An hour passed and my oldest son woke up. He came up to me and asked, "Mommy, what was that last night?" "What do you mean, baby?" I asked. "The man goat that was hurting you. What was that?" I told him I didn't know. Him asking that proved to me that it wasn't a dream. So I started researching it. What I came across scared the shit out of me. It was Belial, a demon lord and one of the 7 princes of hell. I blessed the entire house after that and didn't have a single incident for a long time, until a few nights ago. But that's a story for another time. Number 4. When I was around 5 years old, I was home alone. My father and stepmother were at work. It wasn't anything new, but I was watching The Curse of King Tut's Tomb. It wasn't scary or anything to me. Not many things scare me, and still don't. But I was sitting on the couch when I heard a bang come from the hallway, which was right behind our entertainment center where our TV was. My eyes moved in that direction, and I saw a large shadow of the god Anubis. I froze, unable to move. Its head turned towards me, and it had glowing red eyes. I wanted to scream, but knew it was pointless. Nobody could hear me. And then a blinding white gold light came from behind it, and screamed in pain, and disappeared. It's still vivid in my head to this day. I don't know who or what the blinding light was, but I knew it saved my life that night. I never told anyone about it until now, because I knew that nobody back then would believe me.